Thanks for joining me here at Preaching the Gospel That Saves, the station that is dedicated to our Apostle Paul's My Gospel, the gospel of Christ, which is the power of God unto salvation, which is only found in Paul's writings, not Peter, James, nor John. And it's 1 Corinthians 15, verses 1, 2, 3, and 4. Paul declares in verse 1, it is the gospel. In verse 2, it's how ye are saved. In verse 3, that Christ died for our sins. In verse 4, that he was buried and rose again on the third day. You trust what Christ did, that he paid for your sins, was buried and rose again on the third day. You are saved. It's not of your works of righteousness that you have done, Titus 3:5. It's not of your law works, Galatians 2:16. It's not of your boasting, and it's not of yourself. It is a gift of God. And now that you're saved, let's have a little fun today. How about Helloween? I have not done a message on Helloween since I've had this ministry, and here it is today. And let's just start off with what one pastor said about how you can tell where someone's heart is. And you know how you can tell where someone's heart is? Just ask them if you can look at their checkbook, okay? If you look at their checkbook, with more than 179 million Americans planning to partake in Helloween festivities, up from 171 million the year before, spending was slated to reach a record high in survey history. They spent $9.1 billion on Helloween candy. $9.1 billion. Wow. Helloween, the etymology. 1781, in a Scottish context, the word and the magical lore about the date were popularized by Burns's poem in 1785, and he attached a footnote explaining it. But it probably dates to 1700 in Scotland and is attested as the name of a tune in 1724. The tune is mentioned again in an English-Scots songbook called The Cheerful Companion in 1783, and Burns was not the first to describe the customs in print. Helloween, or Holy Eve, is the evening previous to the celebration of All Saints. That it is propitious to the rites of divination is an opinion still common in many parts of Scotland. John Maine, footnote to his poem Helloween, Glasgow, 1783. It is a Scottish shortening of All Hallow Even, Eve of All Saints, last night of October, from the 1550s, the last night of the year in the old Celtic calendar, where it was Old Year's Night, a night for witches, a pagan holiday given a cursory baptism. Hallow Day for All Saints' Day is from 1590s. Earlier was Halloween Day in the late 13th century. You can look up Robert Burns's poem from his website at rbwf.org.uk/Halloween. And I'm not going to go through that whole poem, but check it out. But here's just a summary of it. Helloween by Robert Burns. Halloween used to be celebrated with parties and games. Many of the games came from old spells to find out who would marry. Players threw nuts with partygoers' names painted on them into the fire coals to see in which order they burst. Here is a poem about one such party. We present it in its original Scottish dialect on the left with a modern translation on the right. I would just encourage you to just take a look at it, read it for yourself, do what you want with it. I just thought I'd put that on here because it might be something that you may not know. But one pastor said, also, 20 to 30 years ago, when I began to encourage people to just disregard Halloween, the reaction was usually that I was a fanatic of some sort. A nice enough guy, but a fanatic nonetheless. The lack of influence of my pronouncements is clearly demonstrated by the fact that Halloween is now the fastest growing of all American holiday celebrations. Like I just told you, it went from $8.4 billion spent on candy to $9.1 billion from 2016 to 2017. So it is. It's steadily increasing every year. All year long, we tell children that it's wrong to talk to strangers, and then one night we send them out to talk to strangers. We know there are problems because we take the candy the kids collect to hospitals to be x-rayed to make sure there are no pins or razor blades in the food, and we throw out everything that was not individually wrapped because it might be drug-laced. Each year, there are instances of arson and property damage, and the question is not if there will be any damage, but how much and whether we will be personally affected. Halloween is the deadliest day of the year for child pedestrian fatalities. 2 decades of data reveal risks beyond the candy. Kids have a greater chance of being fatally injured by a car on Halloween than any other day of the year, including the 4th of July and New Year's Day. State Farm, the nation's leading auto insurer, teamed up with research expert Bert Sperling of Sperling's Best Places to better understand the risks kids face as they take to the streets in search for treats. Sperling's Best Places analyzed more than 4 million records in the fatality analysis reporting system from 1990 to 2010 for children up to 18 years of age. On October 31st, a description of the methodology follows the graphs below. That detailed analysis revealed the following. Halloween was the deadliest day of the year for child pedestrian accidents. 115 child pedestrian fatalities occurred on Halloween over the 21 years of an analysis. This is an average of 5.5 fatalities each year on October 31st. 5.5 fatalities, which is more than double the average number of 2.6 fatalities for the other days. The deadliest hour. Nearly 1/4, 26 out of 115 of accidents occur from 6 o'clock to 7 p.m. Over 60% of the accidents occurred in the 4-hour period from 5 to 9 p.m. Middle of the block was the most hazardous. Over 70% of the accidents occurred away from an intersection or crosswalk. Ages most at risk on Halloween. Most of the fatalities occurred with children ages 12 to 15, 32% of all child fatalities, followed by children ages 5 to 8. I would guess because the 12 to 15 don't have their parents with them. Drivers who posed, again, that's my guess, he doesn't have it here, but drivers who posed the greatest risk was ages 15 to 25, accounted for nearly 1/3 of all fatal accidents involving child pedestrians on Halloween. It is also known as the Devil's Night. In the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey, Halloween is the high mass for Satan. Anton LaVey is called the Black Pope by many of his followers. He began the road to high priesthood of the Church of Satan when he was only 16 years old and an organ player in the carnival. This is what he says in his book, The Satanic Bible on Religious Holidays by Anton LaVey. The highest of all holidays in the satanic religion is the date of one's own birth. This is in direct contradiction to the Holy of Holy Days of other religions, which deify a particular God who has been created in an anthropomorphic form of their own image, thereby showing that the ego is not really buried. The Satanist feels, why not really be honest? And if you're going to create a God in your image, why not create the God as yourself? Every man is a God if he chooses to recognize himself as one. So the Satanist celebrates his own birthday as the most important holiday of the year. After all, aren't you happier about the fact that you were born than you are about the birth of someone you have never even met? Or for that matter, aside from religious holidays, why pay higher tribute to the birthday of a president or to a date in history than we do to the day we were brought into the greatest of all worlds? Doesn't that sound familiar? Let's take a look at Genesis chapter 3, verses 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden. But of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. And now, maybe you don't know this, but Satan has a 5-point plan, and you'll find it in Isaiah 14, chapter 14, verses 12, 13, and 14. And by the way, all verse references is according to God's perfect word without error, the 1769 King James Bible. Isaiah 14, 12 through 14. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thy heart, here's the 5 points. Number 1, I will ascend into heaven. Number 2, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. Number 3, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. That's kind of fishy, isn't it? The north, isn't that where Santa is, the North Pole? In the sides of the north. I know we're not talking about Santa right now, but isn't it funny how he has the same letters as Satan and lives in the north? And check out this verse too. Zechariah chapter 2, verse 6. Ho, ho, come forth and free from the land of the north, saith the Lord. If I have spread you abroad as the four winds of heaven, saith the Lord says, ho, ho. Isn't that interesting? Just thought I'd throw that one out at you. How about Isaiah 14, 14? Point number 4, I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. And number 5, I will be like the Most High. Hey, and by the way, if you're using a new translation, they have Jesus falling from heaven, not Lucifer. And here's from your New American Substandard Version. Isaiah 14, 12. How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn. Notice the word, O Lucifer, son of the morning, is not there. It's O star of the morning, son of the dawn. You have been cut down to the earth. You have weakened the nations. Wow, where's Lucifer? He's not there. I wonder why. Well, check this out. Who's the star in your new, easier to read, dumbed down translation? Well, go to Revelation 22:16. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star. Wow, Jesus is the morning star, and your New American Substandard perversion from the pit of hell has him getting kicked out of heaven. Good job. I'm glad you're proud of trafficking in that despicable translation that you call a Bible. Despite the fact that some of us, and here we are going back to what Anton LaVey has said in his satanic Bible about holidays, despite the fact that some of us may not have been wanted, or at least were not particularly planned, we're glad, even if no one else is, that we're here. You should give yourself a pat on the back. Buy yourself whatever you want. Treat yourself like the king or God that you are, and generally celebrate your birthday with as much pomp and ceremony as possible. After one's own birthday, the two major satanic holidays are Walpurgisnacht and Halloween, or All Hallows Eve. So right after the celebration of your birthday, the second most important satanic holiday is Halloween. Isn't that nice? Saint Walpurgis, or Walpurga, or Walburga, depending upon the time and area in which one is referring to her, was born in Sussex about the end of the 7th or the beginning of the 8th century, and was educated at Winburn, Dorset, where after taking the veil she remained for 25 years. She then, for instance of her uncle, Saint Boniface, and her brother Saint Willibald, set all along with some other nuns to found religious houses in Germany. Oh gosh, with nuns. Her first settlement was at Bischofsheim in the Diocese of Mainz, and 2 years later, 754 AD, she became abbess of the Benedictine nunnery of Heidenheim within her brother Wilbert's diocese of Eichstätt in Bavaria, where another brother, Weinbald, had at the same time also been made head of the monastery. On the death of Weinbald in 760, she succeeded him in his charge, retaining the superintendence of both houses until her death on February 25th, 779. Her relics were translated to Eichstätt, where she was laid in a hollow rock from which exuded a kind of bituminous oil, afterwards known as Walpurgis oil, regarding as having miraculous efficacy against disease. The cave became a place of pilgrimage, and a great church was built over the spot. She is commemorated at various times, but principally on May 1st, her day taking the place of an earlier pagan festival. Amazingly enough, all of this rigmarole was found necessary simply to condone the continuance of the most important pagan festival of the year, the grand climax of the spring equinox. The eve of May has been memorialized as the night that all of the demons, specters, afrits, and banshees would come forth and hold their wild revels, symbolizing the fruition of the spring equinox. Halloween, All Hallows Eve, or All Saints' Day falls on October 31st or November 1st. Originally, Hallows Eve was one of the great fire festivals of Britain at the time of the Druids. In Scotland, it was associated with the time when the spirits of the dead, Scotland, Robert Burns, right? When the spirits of the dead, the demons, witches, and sorcerers were unusually active and propitious. Paradoxically, All Hallows Eve was also the night when young people performed magical rituals to determine their future marriage partners. Wow, Robert Burns's poem. Many of the games came from old spells to find out who would marry. The youth of the villages carried on with much merrymaking and sensual revelry, but the older people took great care to safeguard their homes from the evil spirits, witches, and demons who had exceptional power that night. The solstices and equinoxes are all celebrated as holidays as they herald the first day of the seasons. The difference between a solstice and an equinox is a semantic one, defining the relationship between the sun, moon, and the fixed stars. The solstice applies to summer and winter. The equinox refers to autumn and spring. The summer solstice is in June, and the winter solstice is in December. The autumn equinox is in September, and the spring equinox is in March. Both the equinoxes and solstices vary a day too from year to year, depending on the lunar cycle at that time, but usually fall on the 21st or 22nd of the month. 5 to 6 weeks after these days, the legendary satanic revels are celebrated. Notice, the moon is involved in all that too, right? So, not to go off base or anything, but, the big highest grossing horror movie, I don't know if it's all time, Helloween again with Jamie Lee Curtis. Now she's 70 years old running around. I saw it when it was first released in the movie theater. I think it was 1978. And then we actually bought it on beta, which was before the VHS tape. Some of you may remember that. Some of you may not even know what I'm talking about. But what is kind of funny, and you might find, even though I just hit you hard with all the satanic stuff, right? Did you know that they used William Shatner's face from Star Trek to make the mold of the mask that Michael wears? That is William Shatner's face. And what's, I think, funny, I don't think Halloween's funny. I think Halloween is a terrible, devilish joke that kills a lot of people. But William Shatner, when he went trick-or-treating with his kids, they wore his mask. It's just unbelievable. So how about the jack-o'-lantern? The reason there is a light in a pumpkin goes back to a disembodied soul named Jack who made a deal with the devil to be given a home, and the devil tricked Jack into living in a turnip. And that you'll get from the World Book Encyclopedia, Volume 9, page 24. The celebration of Halloween comes from Druid witchcraft, which Mr. LaVey Anton mentioned, right? And the celebration of Samhain, the Lord of the Dead. And you'll find that in the book Halloween Through the Centuries, page 4. Halloween was the night when souls that were not allowed to go to heaven or hell were allowed to inhabit animals, black cats, or fairies and ghosts, and they all had liberty to walk around that one night. And you'll find that in Highland Superstitions, page 44. And how about those superstitions? You know, have you ever asked yourself, why is it in a graveyard all the tombstones face east? They face the sun. You ever wonder about that? You ever wonder about it's either the Hindus or the Buddhists that only buy houses and their front door has to face east, and that would be the sun? Have you ever wondered, too, when you're going up and down your stairs, that there's only 12, there's never 13? It's interesting. Trick or treat started as bribery when pagan priests would require money for their gods, and if they didn't get the money, damage was done. And you'll find that in Folklore, page 11. The pagan practices of Halloween were Christianized by 4th century Emperor Constantine, which, by the way, worshipped the sun god, and he's the one who made the cross with the circle on the top, which is called a sconce, and the sconce represents the cross of Jesus, and then the circle represents the sun god. By the 4th century, Emperor Constantine and were made part of the Catholic Church calendar in the 800s, the World Book Encyclopedia, Volume 9. And that's what I thought was most curious, that Anton LaVey mentioned in the Satanic Bible about the nuns and the second most important holiday after someone's birthday. It is the one night of the year in which a child experiences the emotions of fear, fantasy, and mystery. And you get that in the Book of Festival Holidays, page 125. When God hath not given us the spirit of fear, 2 Timothy 1:7. Ancient history, demonstrates why Halloween is called the Devil's Night, and some of what used to take place should not be mentioned in a family newspaper. At one time, the celebration even included human sacrifices. And you'll find that in 4 Witches, page 122. And hey, how about, since we're rolling here, how about a bonfire on Halloween too? The etymology of bonfire in the 1500s from Middle English, banefire, the late 15th century, a fire in which bones are burned. And then let's not forget about Ring Around the Rosie, right? This is like Ripley's Believe It or Not, but it's out there in case you didn't know. Just look it up and see what you find. Many preschoolers around the world are taught the popular Ring Around the Rosie nursery rhyme. Many versions of the game involve singing the song and walking around in a circle with joined hands and falling or curtsying at the very end. The most common American version of the rhyme usually goes something like this. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Like many nursery rhymes and folk songs, many varieties exist. The British version of the song has a slightly different third line, a tissue, rather than ashes. Folklore scholars have been searching for the origin of this popular nursery rhyme, and a few theories about it exist. Here's one that I thought was interesting. Ring around the Black Death. After World War II, folklorists theorized that the rhyme's origin date back to medieval Europe. Scholars saw similarities between the rhyme's cryptic lyrics and the circumstances surrounding the deadly plague that swept across Europe and killed many millions of people. They thought the ring around the rosy referred to a red circular rash common in some forms of plague. The posies would have represented the different flowers and herbs people carried to ward off disease. The ashes, or a tissue, of falling down was supposed to mimic sneezing and eventually dying from the disease. Isn't that nice? You could do what you want with that, but I think it's curious that it all has to do with the devil and death, right? I'm glad I'm Pauline in my doctrine and do not participate in any devilish holidays. Colossians 2:8, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit after the tradition of men, after the rudiments of the world, and not after Christ. Colossians 2:16, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day or of the new moon or of the Sabbath days. Verse 17, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Christ. That's right. That's what's in place today. Those other things, the new moons, which is supposedly, how Anton figured out his religious holidays. And isn't that how they figure out Easter every day? And Galatians 4, 9, 10, and 11. Not every day, every year. Easter falls on the new moon every year. Galatians 4, 9, 10, and 11. But now, after that you've known of God, or rather are known of God, how turn ye again to the weak and beggarly elements whereunto ye desire again to be in bondage? Ye observe days and months and times and years. I'm afraid of you, lest I have bestowed upon you labor in vain. That's right. I am afraid of all these people that practice this pagan day. Thanks again for listening. Email me with any doctrinal questions from my website at preachingthegospelthatsaves.com from the contact page. Subscribe to my YouTube channels. Don't forget about my bookstore blog. We are currently going to be starting a new blog titled, Where is Jesus? Because Jesus is like finding a needle in a haystack in your new Sinaiticus Vaticanus Roman Catholic perverted Bible translations, not Bibles. And check out my new study on the book of Ephesians, only on my website in MP3s. Thanks again.